States of Europe. Yes, welcome to the show. This week's special episode is Thamar Zijlstra, who is a fascinating Dutch woman. And it is, again, your host, me, Greg Shapiro, the American Netherlander, your suave and charming host. We're trying to give the EU the respect they deserve by making fun of them just like anybody else. Hope you appreciate my new hairstyle, which is not so much short, but trying to brush it all forward like a 19th century thing. I don't know. That's what my wife said. So, honey, this is for you. This week, we have a special guest, Thamar Zijlstra, a representative of the European Alternatives Group. One of their projects is the European Initiative for Media Pluralism. And with the news this past week, it sounds like that might be an interesting thing to talk more about. Thamar, how you doing?
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Very well. Thanks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. We're going to check in with you in just a minute because I think some of the news we were already talking about is in the headlines this week. So, great. Thanks for being with us. And first, the headlines. Well, Europe has a new European Commission. Yay! I, for one, welcome our new boring overlords. And it's not a mirror. There we go. Right. New EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker was sworn in with the rest of the 28 commissioners on the 1st of November, with about as much fanfare as an international darts championship. Correction, there was much more enthusiasm for the International Darts Championship. And of course, there was a farewell ceremony for outgoing Commission President Jose Manuel Barroso, as well as Van Rompuy. But Barroso, whose 10 years on the job, was rewarded by Angela Merkel with 2 porcelain plates, one for each. Barroso will add the plates to his Nobel Peace Prize for quietly behind the scenes keeping the Eurozone together. But everyone agreed that the porcelain plates are actually a much more fitting gesture for the work they've done. In other news, the European Central Bank announced 10% of the 130 banks failed the so-called stress test to see if they could withstand a financial crisis, with the highest percentage of failing banks in Italy. Greece was thrilled. Good job, Greece. French cultural minister, she has admitted that she has not read any works of Nobel Literature Prize winning author Patrick Modiano. And in fact, she admitted that she has not read any books in 2 years, causing the French Twitter sphere to explode with criticism. This is Minister Pellerin, who followed up by saying the reason she hasn't read a book in 2 years is because she's mostly working 14-hour days, responding to French people's complaints and legal issues. The French Twitter sphere replied that, they would have heard that second part of the statement, but they didn't have time. In financial news, banks may have violated pledges. Tune in for next week's story. Banks definitely violated pledges. And now that IS beheadings and the Ebola threat are on the decline, news ratings are falling. The International New York Times responded with this front page: the horror before the beheadings, just in time for Halloween. We hope you're all suitably scared. One of this year's most popular costumes for Halloween was the Ebola safety gear, including sexy Ebola nurse costume. The odd thing here is there must be a label on this costume saying warning does not protect against Ebola, meaning that if you actually need that warning on your costume, you may have somehow contracted Ebola already. But the International New York Times, after their scary headline, they followed up with a great bit of journalism juxtaposing fast food workers in America, who earn about $9 an hour, with fast food workers in Denmark, who earn the equivalent of $20 an hour. Burger King responded to this article saying that, well, since they have to pay European workers so much more, the franchise in Denmark is not as profitable, meaning basically that European workers are benefiting from the low wages paid to U.S. workers, basically U.S. workers suffering so white Europeans can have their well-being. To celebrate this time-honored arrangement, this week's kids' meal is 12 Years a Slave. In Hungary, right-wing populist President Viktor Orban is proposing to introduce Europe's first internet tax, only 50 cents per gigabyte, and the Hungarian public said no! After an outcry online and massive protests this past weekend, Viktor Orban now says he will not levy an internet tax. Instead, he's planning to ban the internet altogether. Well, now it's time to check in with this week's good news, bad news, and the theme this week is election results. Tunisia, the birthplace of the Arab Spring, held elections in which secularist parties won. The bad news, Tunisian fundamentalists couldn't vote because they've already left to join the fight in Syria. But the good news, in Ukraine, election abnormalities were reported at a minimum. Election observers reported they saw no abnormalities, but the bad news, they did not include the Russian separatist areas to the east bordering on Russia. They didn't really bother to vote. The good news is if the separatist provinces don't fit into Russia, they'd make a perfect match with much of America that can't seem to be able to vote. Ah, America, where the voter turnout reflects the passion that we have for democracy. We love democracy, except on election day, then either I was too busy to vote or these people waiting in line actually couldn't vote because they didn't have the proper ID. So, bad news. The Russian separatist region of Donetsk is now set to hold their own separate elections for their own separatist leader. The good news, David Bowie issued a special plea saying, "Stay with us, Donetsk." Bad news, Russia has agreed to recognize these separatist elections of Donetsk and Luhansk as legitimate. But there is good news, the EU managed to somehow broker a deal. This was widely unexpected, but there was a lot of unpaid debts from Russia, from Ukraine to Russia, and now, thanks to the EU, Russia will now provide heat and gas to the Ukraine. Who brokered the deal? German outgoing energy commissioner, this guy, Germany's Günther Oettinger. Bad news, he's done as energy commissioner. But the good news, he is going to continue as the new commissioner for the digital economy. And that brings us back to this sort of Ukrainian media policies or Russian media policies being introduced in parts of the European Union and our guest Thamar Zijlstra. So this seems like a perfect chance to jump over to media pluralism and protecting some of the values that we think of as very European. But before we get to the real details, we'd like to take a short break, and when we come back, Thamar Zijlstra. It's me, Greg Shapiro, the American Netherlander.
Welcome to Sundown.
Hi, I'm Nate Titor, the host of the What's Up Amsterdam TV show.
Well, 8 years later, it's out in book form.
My name's You mean we win wars and kick ass and we want to help America. And that's why everyone, I'll be joined by the city next door.
Jewish person, Jewish
The neighbourhood market is on every third Sunday of the month, but this year there will be 4 weekend establishments organized, one every 2 months. Yeah, it's just like a really, you know what I mean by that? A real kind of what's coming next policy to it.
Which managed to convince the council.
But yeah, sometimes he was verging on the cheesy.
It's quite an expensive project, but it's so beautiful.
He's on the same side, Jesse, motherfucker.
And we're all part of Broadcast Amsterdam.
It's always been weird. So that was.
Broadcast Amsterdam, we're doing our best to create a media platform, not just for Amsterdam, but in my case, for the entire European Union. So, there may be places where you can't get this broadcast because you might not have equal access to the internet. And that's why we're talking here to Thamar Zijlstra. I'm going to fix your microphone here just a moment. Get it a little bit closer.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's not right if the American has a leaning into the microphone and yours is too far. So, Thamar, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Here's a get to know you segment that we call the 6 in 60. 6 questions in 60 seconds. And the first thing off the top of your head is the right answer. Whatever you say is right. 60 seconds. Here we go. First of all, do you have any brothers and sisters?
Yes, one sister.
One sister, older or younger?
Older. A little bit older.
Oh,
Just
really?
2 children.
Oh, that's nice. Okay.
Yeah,
Where did you grow up?
In Limburg.
In really?
In your region.
Oh,
Like,
right.
it's very European, most European part of the Netherlands, I think.
I get it, right, yeah.
So close to Germany, so close to Belgium.
Were you living in Limburg during the Maastricht Treaty?
No, I'd moved.
Oh,
I
okay.
think. No,
All right,
just moved.
good.
Yeah.
Best vacation spot. Where do you love to go on vacation?
Oui, Amsterdamse waterleidingduinen.
Oh,
It's
really?
the best part of Amsterdam, I think.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
In Amsterdam. And
Yeah.
what book are you reading right now?
Circle by Dave Eggers.
Me too.
Ooh, scary book.
Yeah, exactly.
Really good.
I'm like 2/3 of the way through. And, okay. That's so funny. We can talk about that next. What poster was on your wall when you were growing up, when you were like 10 years old?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, okay. And just any particular role or?
I lost my enthusiasm for him when he did the Titanic.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
my
okay.
enthusiasm
So
sank
pre,
with that cheesy film. It's horrible.
If you could have dinner with any person, living or dead, who would you pick?
I would have Stéphane Hessel. He's
Okay.
amazing. He's a French diplomat, and he was during the Second World War. He was imprisoned,
Okay.
because he was part of the resistance. But
Right.
after the Second World War, he was part of creating fundamental human rights with the United Nations,
Wow.
and he was a proponent of democracy and human rights. And he also inspired the Indignados, the Spanish guys who were on the squares a couple of years ago, because he wrote Indignez-vous, and that inspired these guys as well. So I think it's amazing that if you're 90 years old and you can inspire young people to
Great.
become politically active, I think that's really amazing.
So he's still alive? Or?
No, he passed away.
He passed
a
away,
year
but he was
ago, I
90 years
think.
and still, okay. Right.
Yeah.
Indignados.
Yeah.
That's wow.
The Spanish Indignados.
Folks, we have a living encyclopedia here. I mean, no, this is so great. Every time I talk to you, I learn more stuff. And,
Good.
Well, let's see. We have a lot of questions submitted from viewers as well. We have our research assistant, Melgosia Krakowska, who is submitting some things as well. And wait, you know her as well? Via
University.
Got it.
Yeah.
She's now, got a good job in Poland. So with the
We're
media
all very
there.
jealous. Yeah.
So she's going to give us hopefully some frontline media updates from the eastern border. But anyway, let's talk a little bit, first of all, about what's going on in Hungary, I guess. Or do you want to talk about how your role, with... I'm going to get it wrong. The European initiatives
for media pluralism.
Yes,
it is
that
a
specific
long
initiative.
title. Yes.
How does that relate
Very
to
specific.
with that hat on? What do you think of what's going on in Hungary right now?
I think it's quite worrying. I mean, we share a political system, like
Yeah.
a European Union,
Yeah.
and we have people from in the European Commission from the Orban government. We have people also from Italy. In Italy, media pluralism is also an issue, part of our government, and I think that's also, it's not a solidarity thing, but it's also in our own interest to take an interest and pay close attention to what is going on in these countries.
Right. And, well, we were talking about the new European Commission. And the way it works is, I guess there's 28 commissioners for 28 different countries, and everybody gets a job. So Hungary has to have a commission post, and that was a sort of political football a bit, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed. Yeah, yes.
And you mentioned his name, Tibor
Navracic.
Okay, Tibor Navracic, right? But we're also talking about Viktor Orban, and let's see. I think the little history is democratically elected, but a right-wing populist. People remember Jörg Haider from Austria. I don't know if there's any comparison, but I'm just trying to paint a picture for people who have no idea. In the Netherlands, there's Geert Wilders, who's right-wing populist. They're not that much in common, but in general, if you can imagine what would happen if someone from the right wing, or in the UK, Nigel Farage, would be swept into power. Is that a fair way to describe what's going on in Hungary?
Yeah, it's it's a bit. It's not as much his ideas, as well as that he has, on top of that, he has 2/3 majority in the parliament, which is quite worrying, because basically he's governing the parliament, but also appointing people to the courts, the constitutional court, and also to the media authority. So slowly he's taking over also the fundamental institutions that are supposed to protect the democracy.
Right. And this would not normally be necessarily worrying, but I mean, Viktor Orban has made statements like comparing. What were you saying?
So last July he gave an interesting speech, looking at China and Russia for inspiration, and saying that illiberal democracies are not so bad at all, because they're economically really successful. Right, which is Russia and China is too. So
I really don't know what's the status of the Hungarian economy. It needs improvement.
Yes, and a good reason to introduce taxes.
Right.
Among which internet.
And the internet tax.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I made a joke about it just now, that maybe he's going to create something like a great firewall, like China. I thought that would be a crazy stretch, but you're saying that just this past July, the Hungarian president stepped up and said, China is a good example of how to manage a country, or manage manage journalism, or Putin in Russia, who I think has admitted, locking up opposition journalists. Was there a case as well in Hungary? Is it that bad in the European Union, in Hungary?
Yeah, what he's done legally is appoint the high authority, members of the high authority that are all members of Fidesz party or affiliated to his party. And he gave that authority a lot of powers. And more concretely, there was a case of Club Radio who didn't get a tender to broadcast on the radio.
Didn't get permission. They were shut down.
And eventually they did get it, but it was a big political struggle.
Really?
And the authority doesn't only have the media authority doesn't only appoint all these channels to broadcasters, but also gives out fines if they feel that it's immoral what people are saying on the radio. So it's that they're really incredibly powerful.
Well, and yet it sounds like there are certain safeguards in place. There's a certain awareness that they are part of Europe, can't get away with just anything. Who is minding the shop here? Is that the European Union? Right now, there's a big changeover, so it seems like, this might be a kind of a moment when everyone's guard is down. Maybe, that's a good time to try to introduce an internet tax or something. So is the European Union doing its job, or is it more like the independent watchdogs like yourself?
Well, the interesting thing is that if member states or countries want to become a member state of the European Union, they have to implement a lot of legislation, also protecting capitalism, but the capitalist economic system, the market economy, but also protecting fundamental rights, protecting democracy. But once they're in, it's incredibly hard for the European institutions to protect these fundamental rights. The European Commission has difficulty protecting and improving legislation in this front and actually demanding and enforcing legislation and protection, while it is part of the fundamental rights charter that we have all signed.
Well, that is a good point. I mean, I was talking to some people yesterday at this Expatica fair. Jonathan Gruber asks a question: how can the EU be the EU if European Union countries don't abide by EU rules? So that's one end. But we also had a woman named Linda who said, if the EU is going to step into a sovereign European country like Hungary and demand that they change rules, or if they crack down, there had better be a very good legal basis, because the EU already has this reputation for overstepping its powers. Anyway, would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, they're both fair points. I think especially the second point is, of course, very prominent and popular, saying that the EU has a bad reputation, but I think it's also partly because it doesn't do a very good job in protecting our fundamental rights and protecting our democracy.
Right.
When the countries of, like the Eastern European countries, became a member of the European Union, their trust in the European Union and the European institution was higher than in their national institutions, but it's rapidly declined. Because it turns out that the European Commission doesn't have the competencies to protect the fundamental rights. And actually, Viktor Orban has now created a little bit of window of opportunity for the European Commission to introduce better legislation to protect media in Europe. Because before we had Berlusconi in Italy, who was also, very powerful in public media, but also had private media held. So basically,
no wonder that when Putin goes to visit,
they have
Putin
great parties together.
Make sure to hang out with good old Berlusconi.
Exactly.
I mean, of course, the media tycoon who's also let's jump to not just Hungary, but indeed maybe like Italy. And but before we do that, tell us a little bit about your organization. I didn't really get, give us the elevator pitch, if you would.
Okay. So the European Initiative for Media Pluralism is is a project of European Alternatives. European Alternatives tries to explore and promote citizenship across borders. We think that citizens need to get organized across national borders because problems are less and less becoming national, and national politicians often are still an obstacle to the general interest of ordinary citizens like ourselves. So we need to get organized and demand that fundamental rights and democracy is implemented on a European level. And obviously media is an issue in a lot of, press freedom is an issue in a lot of EU countries. So that's why we...
Well, just last week we had a whole episode about the European Urban Knowledge Network. So they were talking about not citizenship across borders, but also what was it? The mayors were talking about cities, literally that maybe people who live in big cities in Europe have more in common with each other than with their own governments. Is that something that you're, initiatives like sharing economy, kind of collective action?
Well, we were part of organizing a conference on citizens' initiatives together with the Dutch government and the municipality of Amsterdam and the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the University of Amsterdam. All these really interesting organizations, and we brought in the European perspective, bringing people from who started European initiatives or like local initiatives from all over Europe, bring them to the Netherlands to learn from what they are doing. So that's also part of the EU, that you, in any international cooperation and exchange, that you can inspire each other, even though contexts might be different. But
of course. I mean, but the language is spoken. Is it English?
Always English. Always English. Never French. Poor French people are trying to promote their language, but no.
The lingua franca is now English.
Definitely.
Is there any specific example of what you were just mentioning? But one initiative that came up, by sharing knowledge from all over Europe.
One of the local initiatives that was really interesting. Well, in Italy you have Teatro Valle. I think they're really cool because the local context is very different from what is going on in Amsterdam. They are a former theater, and it was sold, or it was meant to be sold. It's this really beautiful classic theater.
Oh, an actual theater. Okay.
Yeah, it's
Not
like
a
an
group,
actual
but a theater,
but an actual physical space, and they decided to occupy it and. Give the audience or people in the neighborhood an opportunity to organize things there, to they give courses. They've created this little public space apart from the government, and they want to stay apart and away from the government as well. And I think they're a really good example of a good project.
That's nice. Well, and then we jump over to Italy, indeed. I personally think of Eastern Europe, maybe Hungary in specific, which is having trouble with media pluralism. But you mentioned Italy as an example as well, and of course you have to think of Berlusconi. But I don't know. What can you give us a survey of how are we doing with media pluralism in general in Europe?
Yeah, it's. In Hungary, the situation is worsening because Viktor Orban, like we said, has introduced a couple of laws. In Italy, Berlusconi is no longer in power, but still legislation hasn't changed. So in the future, it might still be possible that someone, holds an office and also has a lot of media companies.
Right.
In Romania and Hungary and Bulgaria.
Yeah, Romania and Bulgaria.
Yeah, it's the same situation. The powers of politicians and media ownership and economic interests are so intertwined that there's no checks and balances anymore. So
really interesting. Well, and those guys are getting profiles in the European Commission as well. Romania, I believe, is bulk is now transport, perhaps, or I'll have to check. Next week we'll have a proper survey of who's in charge of what.
That would be a good poster for your bedroom.
I know. Yeah. Romania, Bulgaria, very opaque for certainly. I think I can speak on behalf of Western, and Europe and Brussels. But okay, well, the farther east you get, again, Gosia, if you're out there in Poland, interested to hear some frontline stories. We have to wrap things up pretty soon. In the Netherlands, we also have the Under Minister Sander Dekker, who recently said that, national, if you're funded by the government, then you should not have entertainment programs on. Even in these sort of, super liberal, advanced, more Western European countries, is there more work to be done in terms of media pluralism?
Yes, absolutely. Think of the UK.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Great example at hand. So, So we shouldn't take our rights for granted. Definitely not.
Well, final thoughts before we go. How can we find out more about media pluralism and more civic action for citizenship across borders?
We have a website, euroalter.com. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you Google European Initiative for Media Pluralism, if you can memorize it, then you'll find our initiative.
You can find the link on the website. And that's it. Signing off. Don't forget to subscribe to me, Greg Shapiro, YouTube, and also the Broadcast Amsterdam YouTube channel, and you can see more stuff and links to Thamar Zijlstra and the European Alternatives site. Thanks so much for being with us, and we'll see you next week.